The greatest gift you could give us is to disappear from our family. Those weren't the words of a stranger. They weren't screamed in a moment of anger. They were spoken calmly, a day before my son's wedding, by the woman he was about to marry. And my son, my Daniel, just stood there and let her say them. For 70 years, I thought I knew what pain was. I had buried a husband, I had worked my fingers to the bone, I had weathered every storm life could throw at me. But nothing prepares you for the moment your own child watches as your heart is carved out of your chest. They asked me to disappear. So I did. But I made sure my absence was a silence so loud, it would echo for the rest of their lives. If you believe that a lifetime of love and sacrifice deserves respect, and that sometimes the quietest goodbyes are the most powerful, then do me a small favor and hit that like button. And subscribe, so you don't miss a single story of justice served. Now, let me tell you how I gave them the gift they asked for. Part 1, Setup and Injustice. My life, up until that point, had been a simple tapestry woven with two threads, love and work. The love was for my late husband, Robert, and for our son, Daniel. The work was everything I did to keep that love warm and safe. Robert was a good man, a builder with calloused hands and a laugh that could shake the dust from the rafters. He left me too soon, a heart attack at 55 that stole the air from my lungs. I was 45 then, and Daniel was just 15. In that gaping emptiness, Daniel became my everything. My sun, my moon, my reason for waking up. Every extra shift I took at the library, the scent of old paper and binding glue clinging to my clothes, was for his college fund. Every weekend I spent tending my garden, canning vegetables until my fingers were stained and sore, was so he would always have a taste of home. The house Robert and I had built, not just with wood and nails, but with laughter and arguments and whispered dreams, became a sanctuary I maintained for him. It was a 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet, tree-lined street. The oak in the front yard, which we planted when Daniel was born, had grown tall and strong, its branches a testament to the years of our life. When Daniel, at 32, told me he had met someone, my heart swelled with a joy I hadn't felt in decades. He brought Emily over for dinner a week later. My first impression was polished. She was beautiful, in the way a magazine advertisement is beautiful. Perfect blonde hair, a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, and a smile that was flawless but didn't quite reach her eyes. Her eyes, I noticed, were constantly moving. They weren't taking in the warmth of the room, the photos of Daniel as a gap-toothed boy on the mantelpiece, or the worn-in armchair where his father used to sit. They were cataloging. Assessing. The silver candlesticks my mother had given me. The Persian rug in the living room. The value of things. I tried. Lord, how I tried. Emily, it's so lovely to meet you, I said, my hands dusted with flour from the apple pie I'd baked, Daniel's favorite. Daniel has told me so much about you. He has, she said, her voice a little too bright. She glanced at Daniel. All good things, I hope. She looked around the living room again. This is a lovely house, Amanda. Very classic. The word hung in the air. Classic. The way she said it, it sounded like a synonym for old or dated. Over the next few months, the little slights began to pile up, like stones in my pocket. When I showed her Daniel's baby album, she flipped through it with a detached air, commenting on the vintage quality of the photographs. When I told a story about Daniel falling out of the oak tree, she'd steer the conversation toward their plans to renovate a modern home. She was an expert at a certain kind of conversational cruelty, the kind you can't call out without looking sensitive or foolish. She was slowly, methodically, painting me as a relic. A sweet, but ultimately irrelevant, piece of her fiancé's past. Daniel, blinded by love, saw none of it. He saw a vibrant, ambitious woman who was making him happy. And because I loved him, I wanted to see it too. I told myself I was being an overprotective mother. I told myself I was just set in my ways. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I pushed all my reservations down and celebrated with them. We want a big wedding, Emily announced over dinner, her hand resting on Daniel's, a diamond the size of a robin's egg flashing on her finger. Something elegant. Timeless. Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of hope. Mom, we're a little tight on savings right now, with the down payment we're trying to scrape together. I knew what was coming. And my heart, foolish and full of love for my boy, leaped at the chance to help. Don't you worry about a thing, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Let me do this for you. For both of you. It would be my honor. I took out a significant portion of my retirement savings. I booked the Callaway Gardens, a stunning, historic venue with acres of roses and a grand ballroom. I hired a photographer renowned for his work in bridal magazines. I met with caterers, tasting cakes and selecting menus. Emily was involved, of course, but in a supervisory capacity. She would approve or veto my choices with a wave of her hand. She never once said, "Thank you." She just said, "Make sure the lilies are white, not cream," or, "The string quartet needs to know not to play anything written after 1940. It's so common. The final gift, the biggest one, was the house. My house. We just can't find anything in our price range that doesn't need a complete overhaul, Daniel had lamented one evening. Emily sighed dramatically. And the interest rates are a nightmare. We'll be living in a tiny apartment for years. I looked around at the rooms that held my entire life. The notch on the doorframe marking Daniel's height each year. The faint scent of Robert's pipe tobacco that still clung to the study curtains. It was my past. But they were his future. Live here, I said, the words feeling enormous in my mouth. After the wedding, move in here. It's too big for me anyway. I can find a small condo, a little one-bedroom. This house needs a family. It needs your family. Daniel's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Mom, are you sure? That's too much. But Emily's face was different. It wasn't gratitude. It was triumph. A cool, calculated victory. Amanda, that's incredibly generous, she said, her smile finally, for the first time, looking genuine. Because she'd gotten something she wanted. The final 2 weeks before the wedding were a blur of appointments and final payments. I transferred the last of the funds to the vendors. I began packing my personal belongings into boxes, stacking them in the guest room. I was tired, my old bones ached, but I was buoyed by the thought of Daniel's happiness. I was giving my son the world, and it felt right. Then came the day before the wedding. It was a Thursday afternoon. The house was quiet, filled with the smell of lemon polish and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I was labeling a box of Robert's old books when the doorbell rang. It was Daniel and Emily. My heart did a little flutter. I thought they had come to see how the packing was going, maybe to help. Come in, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Daniel looked pale. He wouldn't meet my eye. He stood shifting his weight by the door as Emily walked into the center of the living room. She was wearing a sharp, white pantsuit, looking less like a bride-to-be and more like a CEO about to announce a hostile takeover. Amanda, she began, her voice devoid of its usual syrupy sweetness. It was flat. Cold. We need to talk. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Is everything all right? The venue? The florist? Everything is fine, she said, turning to face me fully. Her eyes were like chips of ice. It's about the future. Our future. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Daniel remained a statue by the door, his gaze fixed on the floorboards. Daniel and I have been talking, and we feel that for our marriage to have the best possible start, we need to be our own, independent family unit. We need to set our own traditions, build our own life, without outside influences. I could barely breathe. Outside influences? Emily, I don't understand. And that's when she said it. She took a step closer, invading my space, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "Amanda," she said, looking me straight in the eyes. "The greatest gift you could give us is to disappear from our family." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds, hanging in the air-conditioned quiet of my home. Disappear? From my family? My family was Daniel. There was nothing else. I looked at him, my son, my boy, pleading with my eyes for him to say something. To laugh and say this was a horrible, cruel joke. He just stood there. Frozen. His face was a mask of conflict, his jaw tight. He was a man caught between his past and his future, and he had chosen to be a spectator. His silence was his answer. His silence was his betrayal. The clock in the hall ticked. Once. Twice. The sound was deafening. Emily's smug, expectant smile was the last thing I saw clearly. All the slights, the little dismissals, the cold assessments, they all clicked into place. This was never about me being overbearing. This was a coup. She didn't want a mother-in-law. She wanted an inheritance without the inconvenience of the person attached to it. She wanted my house, my money, my son. But she did not want me. A strange calm washed over me. The searing pain in my chest cooled into something heavy and solid. Ice that I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. A lifetime of being a mother, of putting my son's needs before my own, had taught me to swallow my own pain. I looked past Emily, at the ghost of a man my son had become. Then I looked back at her. I raised my chin, and in a voice that was little more than a whisper, but held the weight of 70 years, I said, "If that's the gift you want, my dear, you shall have it." Emily's smile widened. She had one. She reached out and patted my arm, a gesture of patronizing finality. "Thank you for understanding, Amanda. It's for the best." They left. The front door clicked shut, and the sound echoed through the hollow spaces inside of me. I stood there for a long time, listening to the ticking clock count down the seconds of a life that had just ended. The love, the sacrifice, the carefully woven tapestry of my world, she had taken a pair of scissors and cut it to ribbons. And in that silence, a lifetime of love shattered. But something else, something cold and hard and clear as glass, was beginning to form in its place. Part 2, Struggle and Escalation. That first night was a descent. Sleep wasn't a refuge, it was a series of short, panicked falls into darkness, each one ending with Emily's words ringing in my ears. Disappear. I would wake with a gasp, the phantom weight of her condescending pat still on my arm. The house, my home for 40 years, felt alien. The familiar creaks of the floorboards sounded like accusations. The photographs on the wall felt like relics from a stranger's life. Was that really me, smiling, holding a young Daniel on my hip? That woman was a fool. A blind, loving fool. My grief wasn't loud. It was a dense, heavy thing that settled in my bones. I made myself a cup of tea, but the porcelain was cold against my lips. I couldn't eat. The apple pie from the day before sat on the counter, a testament to a love that was no longer welcome. I took the entire dish and scraped it into the garbage bin, the sound of the rich filling hitting the plastic bag feeling strangely, horribly final. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "Mom, I'm sorry about today. M can be a little blunt. Things are just stressful with the wedding. Let's talk after the honeymoon." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keypad. Each word was a tiny, perfectly crafted insult. Blunt. She wasn't blunt, she was cruel. Stressful. This wasn't stress, it was a calculated eviction from my own family. After the honeymoon. He was deferring me. Putting me on a list of chores to be dealt with later. There was no apology for his silence. No defense of his mother. He was asking me to absorb the blow, to swallow the poison, and to wait patiently until he had time for me. That text message was more painful than Emily's original demand. Her cruelty was that of an enemy. His was the quiet betrayal of a beloved son. That was the moment the ice in my veins began to harden into steel. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off and set it on the kitchen counter, a silent black rectangle. It was a link to a world I no longer belonged to, a world that had voted me off the island. I spent the rest of the night walking through the house, not with sadness, but with a new, chilling clarity. I wasn't just in a house, I was in an asset. An asset Emily had already claimed. I ran my hand over the dining table Robert had built. We had hosted decades of birthdays and holidays here. To Emily, it was just a piece of classic furniture to be replaced. I looked at the garden, my sanctuary, where I had spent countless hours coaxing life from the soil. To her, it was just a yard to be landscaped. And me? I was just the live-in caretaker, the inconvenient ghost who came with the property. Disappear. The word echoed again, but this time it sounded different. It wasn't just a wound. It was an instruction. It was a challenge. And for the first time since they had walked out my door, a flicker of something that wasn't pain ignited within me. It felt like purpose. What does it mean to disappear? It means to vanish. To leave no trace. To remove oneself so completely that you become a memory. She wanted me gone. Fine. But she seemed to have forgotten something crucial. A ghost has no possessions. A ghost cannot sign checks. A ghost cannot own a house. If I was to disappear, then everything that was mine had to disappear with me. The sun began to rise, casting long, gray shadows across the living room floor. The dawn of the day before my son's wedding. A day that was supposed to be filled with joyful anticipation. Instead, it was the dawn of my liberation. I found the old, worn address book where I kept my important numbers. My hand was perfectly steady as I looked up the number for David Chen, my lawyer and a friend since Robert and I first bought this house. David was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had handled Robert's will with quiet compassion years ago. I turned my phone back on, ignoring the screen as it lit up with another notification from Daniel. I dialed. David picked up on the second ring, his voice warm. Amanda. To what do I owe the pleasure? Getting everything settled before the big day? I took a deep breath. The air felt clean and cold in my lungs. David, I said, my voice clear and even. I need your help. I'm changing my plans. Oh. A last-minute change to the will? Sensible, with a new daughter-in-law joining the family. No, I said. Not the will. Everything else. I'm liquidating a lifetime. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could picture David in his leather chair, pushing his glasses up his nose, his brow furrowed. Amanda, what's going on? Are you all right? I've never been better, David, I said, and the surprising thing was, I meant it. I've been given a gift. The gift of clarity. I need to cancel a few contracts. And I need to sell my house. Immediately. Sell the house? Amanda, the wedding is tomorrow. Daniel and Emily are supposed to be. Their plans have changed, I cut in, my tone leaving no room for argument. David, I need to know. Who is the legal owner of my house? You are, of course. The deed is solely in your name. Robert left it to you, free and clear. And the wedding at the Callaway Gardens? The caterers, the florist, the photographer. Who signed those contracts and whose bank account are the payments coming from? You did, Amanda. All of it. We reviewed it last year for your estate planning. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled in what felt like an eternity. They had assumed my generosity was a given, a permanent fixture in their lives. They had mistaken my love for a weakness. They had forgotten that the hand that gives is also the hand that can take away. Good, I said softly. Here's what I need you to do. For the next hour, I laid out my plan. David listened, his professional silence occasionally punctuated by a low whistle or a quiet, I see. He didn't ask for the emotional reasons behind it. He was a good lawyer. He understood that the facts were all that mattered. The fact was, I was the owner. I was the client. I was the one paying the bills. And I was now choosing to stop. He agreed to start making the calls immediately. Legally, I might lose some deposits, but David was confident that with less than 24 hours' notice, the vendors would be under no obligation to perform services that were no longer being paid for. Funding, he would explain to them, had been withdrawn by the client. It was clean. Impersonal. Final. Next, I called a real estate agent, a hungry young woman named Sarah whom I'd met at a neighborhood barbecue. I told her I wanted to sell, and I wanted to sell now. I told her I'd take the first reasonable cash offer, no contingencies. The market was hot. She promised she'd have a buyer lined up by the end of the day. The final call was the hardest. It was to a moving company. I asked for their emergency, same-day service. I need an entire house packed up and moved into storage by 6 o'clock this evening, I said. The dispatcher whistled. That's a big job, ma'am. A real rush. I'll pay double your usual rate, I said without hesitation. Money was just paper now. It was a tool. Nothing more. As I hung up the phone, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The grief was still there, a hard knot in my chest, but it was no longer my whole world. It was now the engine for my new purpose. Emily wanted a life without me. I would give her exactly that. A blank slate. An empty house. A cancelled party. She would arrive tomorrow morning, the blushing bride, ready to step into the life I had built, only to find that the foundation had vanished from beneath her feet. That I looked over at my phone again. 3 missed calls from Daniel. A new text, Mom, please pick up. I'm getting worried. Worry. He was worried now. When his inheritance was on the line. Not when my heart was breaking in front of him. I picked up the phone, held my finger over the block button for a moment, and then stopped. No. That was too easy. Disappearing wasn't about blocking a number. It was about removing the reason to call. She picked up the phone, her hand steady for the first time in days. David, she said to her old friend and lawyer, I need your help. I'm liquidating a lifetime. And as the first rays of the morning sun streamed through the window, I began to pack my first box. Not the boxes for storage. The boxes for me. Part 3, The Turning Point and Revenge Planning. The arrival of the movers 4 hours later was like the beginning of a military operation. A large truck rumbled to a stop at the curb, and a team of 4 efficient, uniformed men came to the door. Their supervisor, a burly man named Gus, looked at the scale of the job and then at me, a small, 70-year-old woman standing alone in a house full of memories. You sure about this, ma'am? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. The whole house? Today? Everything, I confirmed, my voice unwavering. Except for what's in the small blue suitcase by the door. Everything else goes into storage. The process was a surreal whirlwind. They worked with a detached professionalism that was exactly what I needed. They saw rooms not as spaces where a life was lived, but as cubes to be emptied. They wrapped the dining table Robert had built in thick blankets, and I felt nothing. They carefully boxed the photos from the mantelpiece, and I felt a distant pang, but it was the ache of a healed overwound, not a fresh cut. I was performing a surgical extraction of my past, and sentimentality was a luxury I could no longer afford. While they worked, my phone buzzed incessantly. It was Daniel. Then, a new number, which I assumed was Emily. I let each call go to voicemail, the vibrations against the countertop a rhythmic reminder of their mounting panic. They were expecting me to be at the wedding rehearsal dinner that evening. They were expecting me to be playing the part of the happy, benevolent mother of the groom. They had no idea that the entire stage was being dismantled around them. Around 2 p.m., I received a call from David. It's done, he said, his voice crisp. Callaway Gardens has been informed of the cancellation due to withdrawal of funds. The contract is clear, with less than 24 hours notice, they keep the full deposit, but no services will be rendered tomorrow. The caterer, florist, and photographer are all the same. They weren't happy, but they were professional. The string quartet was surprisingly understanding. "Thank you, David," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. The first domino had fallen. "There's more," he said. "The real estate agent, Sarah? She's a piranha. She had a cash buyer, an investor who loves the neighborhood, within 90 minutes. He's seen the online listing from a few years ago when you refinanced. He's willing to offer 10% below market value for an as-is, all-cash sale that closes in 2 business days. No inspections, no contingencies. He just wants the property." "Take it," I said instantly. "Amanda, you could get more if you wait." "I'm not interested in more money, David. I'm interested in speed. I want the sale to be ironclad and complete before Daniel and Emily even realize what's happened. Can you draw up the papers?" "I already have," he said. "Just waiting for your go-ahead. There's just one last thing. Your cabin, by the sea." The cabin. My small, weathered cottage on the coast, 200 miles away. Robert and I had bought it for a song 30 years ago. It was my happy place, the one place that was truly and completely mine, filled only with the sound of the waves and the seabirds. "What about it?" I asked. "It's the only other major asset in your name. Are you selling that as well?" I thought of Daniel. Not the weak man who stood silent in my living room, but the little boy who used to build forts out of driftwood on that very beach. The boy who believed his mother was the strongest woman in the world. A part of me, the mother in me, still loved that boy. She hadn't asked me to disappear from his life. She had said our family. Perhaps there was a distinction. "No," I said slowly. "I'm not selling it. I want you to draft a quitclaim deed. I'm transferring ownership of the cabin." "To whom?" David asked. "To Daniel," I said. "And Daniel alone. Make the legal language as restrictive as possible. It is his, and his only. It cannot be considered a marital asset." David was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "That is either the kindest or the cruelest thing you've done all day, Amanda. I can't quite decide which." "Perhaps it's both," I whispered. "I was giving my son a refuge, a place to escape to. But it was a solitary refuge. A place where he would have to sit alone with his choices. It was a final gift, and a final lesson." By 5 p.m., the house was a hollow shell. The rooms echoed. The walls were bare, showing faint rectangles where pictures had hung for years. The air was thick with the smell of cardboard and dust. The movers were loading the last few boxes onto the truck. Gus, the supervisor, approached me with a clipboard. "That's everything, ma'am. Sign here, please." As I signed, my phone rang again. This time, I saw the caller ID, Callaway Gardens. It must be the venue manager. My heart skipped a beat. Had David missed something? I answered, my voice tense. "Hello? Hello, is this Amanda?" a frantic voice asked. It wasn't the manager. It was Emily. My blood ran cold. They must have called the venue to confirm some last-minute detail. "Emily," I said, my voice a flat, calm slate. "Amanda. What is going on?" "We just got a call from the venue coordinator. She said the event for tomorrow is cancelled. She said the funding was withdrawn. This has to be a mistake, some kind of horrible bank error. You need to call them right now and fix this." Her voice was a shrill, panicked shriek. The entitlement dripped from every word. "There is no mistake, Emily," I said calmly. "What? What are you talking about? Our wedding is tomorrow." "You asked me for a gift," I said, my voice as cold and quiet as a winter morning. "You asked me to disappear from your family. I am simply honoring your wish. I could hear her sputtering on the other end. Disappear? What does that have to do with the wedding? The wedding was my gift to a family I thought I was a part of, I explained, as if to a child. Since you have made it clear I am not, the gift is rescinded. The house you plan to live in? That was also a gift. That, too, is rescinded. I heard a muffled sound, and then Daniel's voice was on the line, breathless and panicked. Mom? Mom, what are you doing? You can't do this. It's my wedding. No, Daniel, I said, the last vestiges of my maternal softness evaporating in the face of his desperation. It was a party I was paying for. And I have decided to cancel it. But, why? He stammered, the pathetic, helpless question hanging in the air. Because my presence, my support, and my money are all part of the same package. Your fiancée made the choice to refuse one part of it. The consequence is that she has to refuse it all. Mom, please, he begged. We can talk about this. Just, fix it. Please, just for tomorrow. We can sort it all out later. And there it was again. The request to swallow the poison. To put on the mask and play the part, just for a little while longer. There is nothing to fix, Daniel, I said. I could hear the movers in the background, the heavy slam of the truck door. It was time. I have to go now. I wish you both all the happiness you deserve. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I then turned it off completely and dropped it into my purse. It was done. The final task was the letter. I had bought a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored stationery and a matching envelope. I sat down on the floor of the empty living room, using a cardboard box as a desk. With my favorite fountain pen, I wrote the note. My handwriting was firm and clear. You asked me to disappear. I sold the house you planned to live in, it was mine to sell. I canceled the wedding I paid for, it was mine to give. Now, you have what you wanted, my absence. I wish you both happiness, wherever you find it. I slipped the note into the envelope. Then, I slid the notarized deed to the cabin and behind it. A final, contradictory statement of love and judgment. I sealed the envelope and wrote Daniel in neat, block letters on the front. I walked into the kitchen and placed the single, white envelope in the dead center of the empty countertop. It was the only object in the entire room. A beacon in a sea of emptiness. With the letter sealed and the last box loaded, I stood in the empty hallway of the house that was no longer hers. The silence was no longer crushing. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a new beginning. The only thing left to do was wait for the dawn. I picked up my small blue suitcase, walked out the front door, and did not look back. Part 4, The Execution and Fallout. I drove through the night. I didn't want to be in the same city, breathing the same air, when their world fell apart. The miles spooled out behind me, each one a thread cut from my old life. I watched the city lights fade in my rearview mirror until they were just a faint, hazy glow, and then nothing at all. The darkness was absolute, punctuated only by the steady rhythm of the highway lights flashing past. I wasn't running away. I was driving toward myself. I arrived at my cabin by the sea just as the sun was beginning to bleed purple and orange over the horizon. The air was cool and sharp with the smell of salt and pine. I unlocked the door to the small, weathered cottage and stepped inside. It was dusty and smelled of old wood and wool blankets, but it was mine. It was a place of peace. I opened a window to let in the sound of the waves crashing on the shore below, a steady, eternal rhythm. I made a cup of tea, sat in an old wicker chair on the porch, and watched the dawn of what should have been my son's wedding day. I felt no anger. No triumph. Just a vast, quiet, and profound sense of release. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, another reality was dawning. I can only imagine the scene, piecing it together from the logic of their panic. They must have woken up early, Emily buzzing with bridal energy, Daniel sick with a dread he couldn't yet name. They would have driven to my house, their house, in their minds, expecting to find me, perhaps contrite, perhaps ready to be managed. They would have seen no car in the driveway. A flicker of annoyance, perhaps. Where could she be? They would have found the front door unlocked. A deliberate choice on my part. I wanted no barriers. The sight that greeted them must have been incomprehensible. The living room, stripped bare. The dining room, empty. The hallway, a hollow tunnel. I picture Emily stopping dead, her perfectly made-up face contorting in confusion, then disbelief. What is this? A joke? Did she move the furniture for the wedding? Daniel would have felt a deeper, colder fear. He would have walked from room to room, his footsteps echoing unnaturally. The bedroom where he grew up, empty. The kitchen, where I'd taught him to cook, sterile and vacant. It was a home that had been exorcised of all its warmth, all its life. It was just a structure. A shell. And then, they would have seen it. The single white envelope on the kitchen counter. A stark, deliberate message. I imagined Daniel's hands trembling as he picked it up. Emily crowding him, impatient. What is it? What does it say? He would have torn it open, his eyes scanning the few, terrible lines. I wonder which words hit him first. I sold the house. I canceled the wedding. Each phrase, a hammer blow. He would have read it again, and then again, the reality of it seeping into his bones like a winter chill. And then Emily, snatching the paper from his hand. Her rage would have been immediate and volcanic. This wasn't about a lost mother-in-law. This was about a lost house. A lost party. A public humiliation. The elegant, timeless wedding she had planned was now a phantom, a ghost of an event that would never happen. Her mask of bridal bliss would have vaporized, revealing the raw, grasping greed beneath. She sold it? She can't do that. We were going to live here. And the wedding. All that money. She stole it from us. Daniel, holding the other document, the deed, would have just stared at it. The property known as 14 Shoreline Drive is hereby transferred to Daniel Miller, as his sole and separate property. A cabin. A small, insignificant consolation prize. A place of solitude when he was supposed to be starting a life of partnership. The frantic calls would have started then. The real one, the ones they made after their panicked call to me. A call to the venue, which would be met with a polite but firm, "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but the event was cancelled by the client who signed the contract. We are already booking another party for the ballroom this evening." A call to the caterer. "Yes, we received the cancellation notice from her lawyer. We can't possibly prepare a meal for 150 people with no notice and no payment." One by one, the pillars of their perfect day would crumble into dust. Each phone call, a fresh wave of humiliation. They wouldn't just be a couple without a wedding. They would soon be the subjects of gossip and speculation among all their friends and family, who would be arriving at an empty venue later that day. Back at my cabin, I took a long walk on the beach. The cold water lapped at my ankles. I found a piece of sea glass, a sharp shard of a broken bottle that had been tumbled by the ocean until it was smooth and beautiful. I closed my hand around it, feeling its serene, worn texture. The sea takes what is broken and, over time, makes it whole again. I didn't turn my phone on for 3 days. I read books. I drank tea. I slept, truly and deeply, for the first time in months. I let the rhythm of the tides wash away the residue of my old life. When I finally did turn the phone on, it was an avalanche. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails filled with rage, then pleading, then silence. A string of texts from Daniel. The first ones were furious. "How could you do this to me? You ruined everything." Then they became desperate. "Mom, call me. We can fix this. I can talk to Emily. I'm sorry. I am so sorry." The last one had come late last night. It was just a photo. A picture of him, standing alone on a dark street. I recognized the iron gates of the Callaway Gardens behind him. He was standing outside the empty venue, on what should have been his wedding night. He was just standing there, a silhouette of regret. He was holding the letter in his hand. The fallout, I heard later, was catastrophic. Emily's fury, deprived of me as a target, turned on Daniel. Their relationship, built on the weak foundation of her ambition and his acquiescence, crumbled under the weight of public embarrassment and financial loss. They broke up within a month. She had wanted a man who could give her a certain life. He had failed to deliver. Daniel tried to call me a few more times. I never answered. I did not want apologies born of desperation. I did not want a reconciliation born of his loss. He had the cabin. If he truly wanted to understand, he could go there and sit in the silence and think about his choices. Maybe one day, he would. As for me, I sold the sea glass and my old wedding ring. I used the money from the house sale to buy a small bookshop in my new coastal town. I spend my days surrounded by stories, the scent of paper and ink, and the quiet murmur of the sea. I am not lonely. I am at peace. I didn't do it for revenge, not really. I did it for respect. My own. I had given my son a lifetime of unconditional love, and when he was asked to choose between that love and a life of convenience, he chose to stand aside. Emily didn't just ask me to disappear, she held up a mirror to my life and forced me to see the truth. That my worth was not in what I could give to others, but in the respect I was willing to demand for myself. They got the gift they asked for. My absence. But in giving it to them, I gave myself the one thing I never knew I had lost, my freedom. And that is a gift I will never, ever give away again. Thank you for listening to this story. Sometimes the most powerful statements aren't made with angry words, but with quiet, decisive actions. If you've ever felt underestimated or taken for granted, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What does it truly mean to reclaim your power? Don't forget to like this video if the story resonated with you, and subscribe for more tales of justice and vindication. Until next time, remember to honor your own worth.